in excelsis Deo, the greeting of the angels to the shepherds on the first Christmas morning. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill towards men. The message brought to us now, as always on Christmas Day, by church bells from all over the United Kingdom. We begin at Grantham in Lincolnshire, where they started building the church tower exactly 700 years ago. The spire, once the tallest in the land, is floodlit at night, and you can see it from miles away, poking up into the sky like a graceful pencil of light. In the middle of the town, brooding no doubt on the theory of gravity, stands Sir Isaac Newton. He went to the local grammar school in 1654, just after the original bells were installed in St. Wulfram's church. 10 years before that, victory had been won at Grantham by the parliamentary forces. Food for thought, perhaps, for a certain Margaret Thatcher, as she studied her history books 300 years later at the high school close to the church. I climbed the tower with the steeple keeper, Brian Buttery, and at the top we found an experienced band of ringers led by Dennis Frith, who works for the post office. The tenor bell weighs 32 hundredweight. No problem at all for Leslie Squires, a big chap who's been ringing bells for 53 years. So let's listen to one of the finest rings of 10 in the country, the bells of St. Wulfram's, Grantham. And from Grantham in Lincolnshire, a fairly short move now across 2 counties to Woodbridge in Suffolk. The square tower of St. Mary's Church is a well-known local landmark. And in 1753, a bell ringer named Andrew Fosdyke raced up and down the 133 steps 7 times in 27 minutes at the age of 66. Well, I've learned over the years that ringers are a long-lived and healthy breed, but all I can say is good luck to Mr. Fosdyke. Once up and once down was quite enough for me. There are no less than 3 married couples, the Elliots, the Petters and the Pilgrims, among the 8 ringers today, most of them in their 20s and 30s. Training new ringers is a bit of a problem because the bells are far from easy to handle, and you can actually feel the bell tower swaying while you're ringing. So in the next year or 2, they're hoping to raise £10,000 to have the bells rehung. So with the hope that the tower doesn't fall down, let's listen now to the 8 bells of St. Mary's, Woodbridge. The 8 bells of St. Mary's, Woodbridge. South now to the peaceful village of Thakeham in Sussex, where a steep path leads up to the ancient church and where the churchyard in springtime is a mass of daffodils. Spread out in front of us is the Sussex Weald and the South Downs, a lovely part of England's green and pleasant land. An ideal setting for the very English art of change ringing, which means that the bells change their order of ringing at each pull of the rope. The ringers themselves stay in the same place, which at Thakeham I was glad to find is at ground level at the west end of the nave. Now, King John appointed his own chaplain as rector here in 1208. Well, the 6 ringers can't quite remember that, but between them, they've been ringing bells for 240 years. Ben Farhall, the captain, first rang at Thakeham when he was 16. Now he's 69. Tom Bird can even beat that. He's been ringing for 57 years. And the only lady, Jean Horton, wearing a green and blue dress, has rung bells in no less than 620 towers all over the country. It sort of gets in the blood. So let's listen to this experienced band as they ring the 6 bells of St. Mary's, Thakeham. The 6 bells of St. Mary's, Thakeham in Sussex. And after 2 churches dedicated to the Virgin Mary, we go now to one with another seasonal name, St. Nicholas. This one is at Carrickfergus in Northern Ireland, where this year town and church are both celebrating 800 years of history. The name Carrickfergus was originally Cragfergus, derived from the legend that a king called Fergus died in a storm at sea when his ship foundered off the rock on which Carrickfergus Castle now stands. Well, these ringers are a competitive lot and have twice been Irish champions. To be a champion ringer, you must have concentration, a sense of rhythm, a feel for mathematics, and plenty of experience, like John Palmer, who's been ringing for 50 years, and William Port for 44. The youngest member of the band, Roger Lindsay, is just 11. Both his parents are there to keep an eye on him, and Christopher, who's 9, is ready to step into his shoes if he doesn't keep up the scratch. Jim McAteer keeps up the tradition of his father and grandfather, who rang the bells of St. Nicholas before him. The band is made up by Ian Caters, an estate agent, and Donald McLean, a medical student. So listen now to the 8 bells of St. Nicholas, Carrickfergus. Well, a heartwarming sound that from a troubled country, the bells of St. Nicholas Carrickfergus in County Antrim. And from there we go back across the Irish Sea to South Glamorgan, to the town of Llantwit Major, and a church which bears the very Welsh name of St. Illtytl. He came to the Vale of Glamorgan in the year 500 AD and founded a monastery which later became a center of education where St. David once studied. The present church was described by John Wesley as abundantly the most beautiful as well as the most spacious parish church in Wales. The 6 bells had already been there for 50 years when he preached at the church in 1777. Today they are rung by an all-male band, but the bells have endearing feminine nicknames. So here's a Welsh Christmas greeting from Moll, Poll, Doll, Prue, Sue, and Bet. 6 bells of St. Illtytl, Llantwit Major, are rung there by a laboratory technician, an assistant analyst, a power station worker, a driver, a telephone engineer, and a teacher. And now it's Scotland's turn as we head north to the Royal Borough of Stirling, where just one of the many historic buildings is the Church of the Holy Rood. Here, 435 years ago, Mary was crowned Queen of Scots at the age of 9 months. 24 years later, John Knox preached at the coronation of her infant son, James. Here, too, in 1651, the Roundheads, under General Monk, occupied the 90-foot church tower and fired on the castle. The marks of the musket and cannonballs of the return fire can still be seen on the tower. Today, the 6 bells are rung for us by members of the Scottish Society of Bell Ringers, who don't ring regularly at any one church, but come together several times a year to ring in all the towers in a given area. So, hands close together with a firm grip, a good vertical pull on the rope, and we hear the bells of the Church of the Holy Rood at Stirling. After the 6 bells of the Church of the Holy Rood at Stirling, we go down to the West Country, to Cheltenham, where St. Mary's Church is tucked away in the centre of the town. George III came here with the royal family in 1788, during a visit which really confirmed the status of Cheltenham as a fashionable spa. You get to the belfry from outside, a throwback, perhaps, to the days when ringers were separated from the church because change ringing was regarded as frivolous. Besides being hard work, physically and mentally, it was also enjoyable, and so not to be encouraged on the Sabbath. I've noticed that romance seems to flourish in bell-ringing circles, and true to form, the captain of St. Mary's, Cyril Ratton, met his wife Marjorie in a Cornish belfry at a ringer's wedding. Now they stand in a circle with the 10 other ringers within the white walls of the ringing chamber. There are furrowed brows and an air of studious concentration, which befits a band largely composed of civil servants and teachers. Valerie Willard, wearing businesslike pink slacks and a red sweater, starts them off. Treble's going, she says, pulling on the rope. She's gone, and we hear the 12 bells of St. Mary's, Cheltenham. 12 bells of St. Mary's, Cheltenham, one of only about 50 rings of 12 in the country. It would take nearly 36 years to ring all the possible changes on 12 bells, so we had to cut them a bit short. Incidentally, the method they were using was called Grantham sinks, in which 11 bells were changing position, but the tenor bell always rang in the same place. Now, in a few moments, we can hear the Christmas message from Her Majesty the Queen, and I'm sure she will remember one event of 1980 with particular pleasure. So we end our program this year with the bells of the village church where her mother was baptized at the end of the Victorian era on September the 23rd, 1900, and where she spent much of her childhood in the friendly red-brick Georgian house nearby. This year, the country rejoiced in the Queen Mother's 80th birthday, and so, with the hope that the bells of All Saints' Church, St. Paul's, Walden in Hertfordshire, will bring back some happy memories, may I wish you, wherever you are, a very happy Christmas.